Chapter 9 is titled Modeling with Functions. Today we're going to do section 911, which is titled Describing Quadratic Equations. It's only one page long, and we're going to answer the question, how do I describe the parabola? For part 1, they wanted us to make a poster, but we already made posters in chapter 6. So today we're just going to talk about the different forms that you will see parabolas or quadratics come in, and what to do with them. And then when we break up into groups, I want you guys to open up your Desmos graphing calculator, and you're going to type these equations in and answer some of these questions, okay? And if you need help typing them in, then definitely ask me to show you how and where to type them in, all right? Box A says, how to find a vertex in the form of y equals the quantity x minus 1 squared minus 4. So you're going to write down the 3 steps that you're going to do to complete this. Number 1, you're going to type the equation into the Desmos graphing calculator. Number 2, you're going to take the pointer and you're going to hover over the vertex. And a point is going to be highlighted and showed to you. And you're going to write down where the vertex is at. It's going to be some number x, comma, some number y. It's going to give you the answer. Okay? That same equation is used for box B. Okay? So you can continue with that same graph and answer part B, which is how to find the x and y intercepts from a graph. So the y-intercept is going to be right here where it's crossing this y-axis. And again, you can take the pointer, hover over that spot, and it'll give you some number x, comma, some number y. Then you're going to find the 2 x-intercepts. There's going to be one right here on the x-axis and one right here on the x-axis. Again, take that pointer, hover over them. It's going to give you some number x, comma, some number y, some number x, comma, some number y. Okay? So that's all just typing that equation in, taking the pointer, finding those points, and writing them down. Okay? It's the beauty of having a Desmos calculator. Okay? It's very user-friendly and it's very, very helpful. Okay? Box C says, how do you find the y-intercepts when you are in standard form? So standard form is x squared minus 2x minus 3. So to get the y-intercept, you're going to plug in 0 for the opposite variable. They're asking you for the y-intercept, you plug in 0 for x. So right here there's an x, and right here there's an x. Okay? We plug in 0 because it's a super easy number to plug in. Because what happens when you take 0 and you square it? You get 0. What happens when you multiply 0 times any number? You get 0. So 0 is an easy number to work with when we're talking about quadratics. So you would have 0 squared minus 2 times 0, so 0, 0, minus 3, which means your answer is negative 3. That gets you your y-intercept. And then box D says, how do you find the x-intercepts from the factored form? So this is the same equation, but this is in factored form. You want to determine what number is going to make this factor 0, and what number is going to make this factor 0. So what number do you plug in for x to get 0 by subtracting 3? 3. 3 minus 3, 0, right? Because they're opposites. 3 and negative 3 are opposites. When you add them together, you get 0. That means you have an x-intercept at positive 3, and then you figure out what number plugs in for this x to get 0. What number plus 1 is 0? Negative 1, right? So negative 1 plus 1, which is its opposite. Negative 1 and 1 are opposites. When you add them together, you get 0. Okay? Part E says, how do you graph a parabola in standard form? So you're going to either use your Desmos graphing calculator, right? Type in the equation, or you can start plugging in numbers, and we're about to make a T-chart on part F, and it's going to start giving you some points. Then you can start graphing the points on the other side of the line of symmetry, because parabolas are always going to be symmetrical until you have enough points to fill it in and see how your parabola is going to go. So start by plugging in 0, because that's the easiest. Another way to do it is to factor, get the x-intercepts, count to the middle, and see where your line of symmetry is going to go, and then start getting points on either side. Okay? That leads us to part F, which is, how do you plug in points? And you can start making what's called a T-chart. So I have enough space down below, so I'm going to go down to the T-chart below, and that's for the equation y equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. Okay? You start plugging in numbers. Whatever number spits out, that goes in the y column. So obviously plugged in 0, because that's super easy. We got the negative 1 and the positive 3 from the factored form. And at 1, negative 4, that ends up being our vertex. Okay, so we've got all these points. If you have a piece of graph paper, you start plotting those points, and you're going to see, oh, I see where my parabola is going to go. Okay. All right, box G says how to write the equation from your x-intercepts. So if you have an x-intercept at negative 1, 0, you're going to take the opposite of negative 1. Intercept at negative 1, 0. You want to take the opposite of that negative 1, and you make your binomial with it. You say x plus 1. So the opposite sign. Okay? If the other x-intercept is at 4, 0, you take the opposite of positive 4, and you say x minus 4. That gives you your other binomial. Then you can take those two binomials, multiply them together, and get your x squared minus 3x minus 4. I just use FOIL, but you can use the box thing. I just didn't have space to draw the box in, but if you want to see the box, I'll come show you after the lesson. Okay? Box H says, how do you find the x-intercepts by factoring? It's kind of the opposite of what we just did in box G. So you factor the equation, and you get x minus 3 and x plus 1. Your x-intercepts are going to be the opposite, because that's what makes it 0. So this one is going to be positive 3, even though we don't generally write the positive sign. I just wanted to exaggerate it there, that it's the opposite. Okay? And then for this one, you take the opposite of positive 1, which is negative 1. And that gives you your two x-intercepts. Box number I says, how do you determine if the parabola faces up or down? I prefer the word opens. They like the word faces. It's kind of like a personal preference, but basically, if your x squared is positive, your parabola is going to open up. And if your x squared is negative, your parabola is going to open down. This way, this way. There's no other thing that determines it. Sometimes you have a coefficient out front. It's either a whole number or a fraction. That's going to make it skinnier or wider. It's going to make it stretch or compress. but it's only the positive or the negative that determines if it opens up or down. Okay? Box J says, how do you find a vertex given the x-intercepts? The answer is that you're going to add the two numbers together, and then you're going to divide their sum by 2. So if your x-intercepts are at -1 and 4, you're going to add -1 plus 4 to get 3. And then you're going to take that 3 and divide it by 2, and you're going to get a 1.5. That's going to give you the x-coordinate of your vertex. Box K is when you're given your equation in standard form. In standard form, it's easier to use part of the quadratic formula, which is -b over 2a. Thank you. The b is your -2. So when we want the opposite of b, it's the opposite of -2. And then in the denominator, you should have 2 times a. In front of this x squared, there's just a 1 that you can't see. So you're going to plug in 1 right there. The opposite of -2 is 2. 2 times 1 is also 2. So 2 divided by 2 is just 1. That gives you the x value. Once you know the x value, you plug it back into the equation. So 1 squared is 1. 2 times 1 is 2. 1 minus 2 is -1. And -1 minus 3 more is -4. That's a lot of mathing. That's why we make this T-chart. And we keep track of them. You plug them in, you write it down. Because if you have to keep going back and figuring them out over again, it gets to be kind of a pain. So once you start figuring out some of the points, write them down. Fill them in your T-chart so you can keep track of them. Okay? And then the last box says how to find the y-intercept from vertex form. For that one, you should plug in 0. Okay? Plugging in 0 is super helpful, and it should be super fast and easy for you. So 0 minus 1 is -1. -1 squared is 1. And 1 minus 4 is -3. Okay? Finish copying that down.